Guys, in this video we're going to be changing the oil in my 2018 Toyota Tacoma. The first step in the process is to remove the skid plate. Now the way that I do it is I will remove the front bolts first. That way the skid plate can kind of hang on the hangers there, and then of course remove the rear bolts and then just kind of let it down. It makes it just a little bit easier in my opinion. Now that we've got our skid plate out of the way, we can reach the drain plug. Make sure that you go for the one that's in front of the cross member. You do not want to accidentally drain your transmission fluid, so make sure you're on the right one, and then you can see it's right there. So we're going to go ahead and drain the oil. While your oil's draining, it's a good idea to go ahead and gauge your tires, and that way you can basically speed up the process of doing your maintenance. I like these compressors like this. You basically put in whatever pressure you're wanting, hit the start button, and then they'll automatically shut off. I'll link a couple down in the description below. It's a good idea to replace the oil plug gasket. A lot of people don't, but that's a mistake, especially as cheap as these things are. You can buy a whole pack of them off of Amazon for just a few bucks. You can see here on this one I've already got the new gasket installed. Our oil is pretty much drained, so we're ready to put this back in. You want to make sure that you kind of clean the area. Make sure that you do not over tighten the oil plug, and because if you do, you can cause yourself a big headache. One thing you want to make sure of before replacing the oil plug gasket is that you remove the old one. They do have a tendency to stick to the oil pan, so you want to make sure that you do not double up the gasket. Be sure to remove the old one and then install a new one. Sometimes you may have to take a soft scraper or something to break those loose, but go through the trouble and I promise you'll save yourself a lot of headaches down the road. Now we're ready to replace the filter. Now these Tacomas have the cartridge type filter, as you can see right here. Now the first thing we're going to do is to take our ratchet and remove that bottom plate where we can actually drain the oil out of that filter cartridge and kind of make things a little less messy. You're also going to need a special wrench to be able to change that. Right here, that wrench is, they're not very expensive. I will leave a link down in the description below to where you can go and pick one of these up. Simply take your ratchet and maybe an extension, and you can see how I've got it inserted there. These can be just a little bit snug, but just loosen it up like that, and then once you get it loose, you can simply unscrew it. There is an O-ring in here that you will want to replace. You will get a new O-ring in with your filter. And something else that you will get as well is a little tool that can help you to drain this. And I'm going to show you a trick to kind of help things stay a little cleaner when you go to drain the oil out of that filter cartridge. Along with the new O-rings that come in your filter is this. And what you can use this for is to drain that oil cartridge, that oil filter cartridge, before removing it. The best way to do that I have found is simply take a old bottle of whatever that's empty, put that piece inside the cap of it, and when you press up to relieve the tension on that valve, what it will do is actually drain into the bottle instead of all over your hand. Now if I can get it in there just right, you can see there that we are now draining the oil that is in that cartridge. Instead of it running all over the place, it's just kind of a way to help keep it a little less messy. Now that I've got that drained, I take the cartridge wrench and my ratchet, and I'm able to remove the oil filter cartridge. Don't get overly aggressive with this. Some of these are, most of them are plastic, and you can get some metal replacements, but don't want to cause yourself any more problems than necessary. There's an O-ring on the outside of this as well that I'll show you here in just a minute. You will get a replacement in your oil filter. It should come with the O-rings for both that plate for the basket as well as the that little plastic piece that you saw me use to drain it. Now, one thing I like to do before I remove that completely is simply try to loosen my tool up on that, because they do have a tendency to want to stick. So just take the ratchet and tap it, and that way when you go to remove that wrench from it, it will come off a little easier. It's loose enough now. I can simply grab it with my hand and unscrew it. There is the old cartridge, a little bit of residual oil just drained right down into my pan, and you can see that O-ring there on the bottom, right here where my finger is. If I can get my camera in the right place. Bear with me, guys. I'm doing this while I am changing the oil in my vehicle. I don't have a lot of professional equipment out here. I'm literally recording this on my cell phone. But once I get that drained, I can simply dump the old cartridge out. And I'm going to come out from underneath here, change both of these O-rings, put the new cartridge in, and then reinstall it. Here's the two O-rings along with the filter. I will link the filter down in the description below where you guys can go and check it out. There's a part number if any of you guys want to know. And again, I'll have them linked down there in the description. I usually buy them off of Amazon. I can typically find them there cheaper in many cases than I can in most of the part stores. So I'm going to replace both of these O-rings on the cartridge. And just to give you guys a close-up, again, there's the one on the outer side of it, and then the one that is in here is actually already fallen out. So I'm going to put the new one in, and I'm actually going to screw that plate back on this bottom one without tightening it, replace the basket or the cartridge filter, and then reinstall this. To make it a little easier on myself, I've got the new O-ring coated in just a little bit of oil, and I'm simply going to take this and go ahead and screw it back in. Just make sure that your old O-ring is not stuck anywhere on this, or it'll cause you a little bit of trouble later on. And you don't have to tighten this up at this point, but I'm just going to snug it up by hand, and that way it will keep that O-ring on there, and it's a little easier to put that O-ring in while it's out here than trying to stand on my head underneath the truck. The next thing I'm going to do is to remove this O-ring. You may need to use a pick. I'm just going to see if I can get it off with one hand. I may not be able to do this, guys, but just wanted to show you if I can. And of course, I can't get it with one hand. So I'm just going to take the end of a screwdriver. Again, you can do it with a pick. These are plastic, guys. Now, I know somebody's probably saying, well, you're going to mess up the threads and all that. Just be careful, and you can get that off just like that. And if you stick around to the end of the video, guys, I will show you how to reset the maintenance light on these. It's a very simple process. I'm going to take my new O-ring, just a little bit of oil, and coat the new O-ring with a little bit of oil, and it will help to make the reinstallation go a little smoother. Okay, guys, I've got the new O-ring coated with just a little bit of oil. I'm going to reinstall it onto the cartridge. Make sure that it's seated exactly the way that it's supposed to be. I'm going to take my new filter and insert it as well. It is a little bit snug, but it does slip down on there. Now I'm ready to reinstall the whole thing back into my truck. Now, you guys remember earlier, I did not tighten up this plate here on the bottom. What I'm going to do now, once I get this snugged up, is I actually take my ratchet insert it into that plate, and then kind of use that plate as a way to help run up that whole cartridge. Okay, that way you can kind of snug up that plate as well as get the cartridge ran back up into its proper position. You don't want to over tighten these because they are plastic. You can break them, so just be very careful. They're not very expensive if you do. I actually keep a spare just in case something were to happen. Now that I've bottomed out, I'm just going to give it just a little bit more pressure to make sure that it's tight. Feel around just to make sure that nothing is out of position. And we should be ready to fill up the oil. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead, put this in just to make sure. Bear with me, guys. Okay. Just want to make sure that I get that torqued in properly and not have all of the pressure just on that bottom plate. Wants to stick, no problem. Take your ratchet, just tap it. And it'll fall right off. Before I put the skid plate back on, I am going to go ahead and fill it up with oil, and that way I can check for leaks. Something you always want to do. You can see here the oil that I use is the 0W20, which is a recommended weight for this particular truck. I do not like deviating too much from what the manufacturer recommends. However, I do like the Mobil 1 oil. I've always had good luck with it. I use it in all of my vehicles. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to fill it up with oil, check for leaks, and then put the skid plate back on. Okay, after I add the oil, I like to start it up, let it run for a minute, and check for leaks. And then after I do that, I'll shut it back down and check the oil again to make sure that we're at the correct level. Recommends, I think, just over 6 quarts for this, like 6.2 or something. But after you let it run for a few minutes and let the oil circulate through the engine, shut it back off, give it a minute, and then recheck your oil. Now that we've got our oil changed, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the skid plate. I typically will hang the skid plate on the front, install the 2 bolts in the back, but leave them loose, and then put the 2 front ones in before I tighten everything up. That's something I'm not going to be able to hold my phone and record while I'm doing, so I'll go ahead and get that done, and then we'll be right back. Okay guys, got the skid plate hanging up, got the bolts started. Save yourself some aggravation. Do not run the bolts up until after you get all of them started, or you're going to have a lot of trouble. Now I'm just going to be running them up, and we will be able to call this good. I've already tightened the front too. Now our last thing is we're going to reset the maintenance switch. Okay guys, the way that you reset the maintenance light on your Tacoma is to turn the key on just for a brief moment. You don't need to start it. And once your screen comes up, you can see here, of course it's coming in to check charging system, maintenance required. My button here on the dash, I want to make sure that I change my what's displaying by pressing the button. I want to make sure that I change that to trip A, okay? And of course, you can just scroll through. You can see as you just keep pressing the button until you get to the one you need. Okay, now that I have it set to trip A, I am going to simply turn my key back off. Just give it a moment for everything to go down the way that it should. And I'm actually going to zoom out, and I'm going to see if I can do this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to press and hold the button, okay? While it is off, while the truck is off, I'm going to press in and hold on that button with that turned into trip A. And then now I'm going to turn on the key while I hold that button in. And you will see it'll take it just a minute, and it will come up as it goes through its stuff. It will come up and reset the light for you, okay? And then after you do that, once I start my truck, it will go through the normal process, but you will see that it no longer displays the maintenance required light. Okay guys, that's how you reset the maintenance light, and you can see it's completely gone. That's how you reset the maintenance light on your Tacoma. This process works for most Toyota Tacoma models. Guys, be sure to check your engine oil again before you finish putting everything away. That way you make sure that you can top it off if you need to. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to check out the links down in the description. That way you can find some of the tools and things that I use, including the oil and filters and that sort of thing. Kind of helps go to support what we do here. Guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, share the video, leave me a comment below, and we'll see you next time.